No pressure. 1 Samuel chapter 26. I'm going to read, for those that weren't here, the first 10 verses, and then we'll start commentating from verse 11. We're in the midst of this weird section in Samuel where God is training his king. And God is keep working on David. He does brilliant in the cave. He spares Saul's life. He doesn't do so well when he wants to kill Nabal. And now we're back to him sparing Saul's life again. And if you look at David's life, as you look at him as king, this old training, it kind of comes out, and he's very he's a different king, he's a different man because of all that God's taken him through. David has been this complex character that he's a man after God's own heart. He's a giant killer. He's all of those things. But he also gets himself in trouble a lot. He has lust issues. He has anger issues. He lies. I mean, he's a complex character. Chapter 26, verse 1. Men from Ziph came to Saul at Jabad to tell him, David is hiding on the hill of Hachilah, which overlooks Jeshimon. So Saul took 3,000 of Israel's elite troops and went to hunt him down in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul camped along the roadside beside the hill of Hachilah near Jeshimon, where David was hiding. When David learned that Saul had come after him into the wilderness, he sent out spies to verify the report of Saul's arrival. David slipped over to Saul's camp one night to look around. Saul and Abner, son of Ner, the commander of his army, were sleeping inside a ring formed by the slumbering warriors. Who will volunteer to go in there with me? David asked Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai, son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother. I'll go with you, Abishai replied. So David and Abishai went right into Saul's camp and found him asleep with his spear stuck in the ground beside his head. And Abner and the soldiers were lying asleep around him. God has surely handed your enemy over to you this time, Abishai whispered to David. Let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I won't need to strike twice. No, David said, don't kill him. For who can remain innocent after attacking the Lord's anointed one? This is kind of what we were talking about on Sunday. We have to understand what God wants us to have. God wants us to have peace and joy and the ability to stand in the day of battle and everything we talked about on Sunday. And our problem is sometimes we understand it, we talk about it, we believe it, we act on it, and then somehow we forget. And this is the great battle of our life. Some days I possess what I have, and then some days I don't. Some days I'm strong, and some days it's like I haven't read my Bible. I've forgotten everything. Look at what he says. He's been on this long journey. It takes about 10 years of running away from Saul before he gets the kingship, and he's about to get it soon in our study. The Lord will strike down Saul someday, or he will die of old age or in battle. Look at what, and we lauded this last week, that is what David believed. That's what he understood. Abishai is telling him, kill him, and David's like, hold on. That's God's business. God will take care of all of that. He says God will either strike down Saul one day, or he'll die of old age, or God's going to put him in battle and he'll die. In other words, Abishai, I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to think about that. God's going to deal with Saul's crazy. Saul deserves whatever, but I'm going to leave it in God's hand. This is like that A+ moment, right? David seems to get it. Verse 11. The Lord forbid that I should kill the one who he has anointed. We've been talking about that God had anointed Saul as king. And David says in 1 Samuel 26:11, God forbid, the Lord forbid that I should kill the one he has anointed. But then David's this is kind of humorous, really. It's really kind of funny. He's not going to kill him, but he's going to mess with him. He's not going to kill Saul, but he's going to make a point. David could have just left, but David sees this as a moment to I'm not going to kill you, but I'm going to one-up you a little bit. I'm not going to kill you, but I'm going to make a point. Not just to me, but to... And I want you to see this. Look at what happens. The Lord forbid I should kill the one he has anointed, but take his spear and that jug of water beside his head, and let's get out of here. This is a dangerous move if you haven't read the story. What we've been saying all along is what David has just said is correct. that God will take care of him, that God will take care of Saul. And normally we don't know if we're going to live today or tomorrow. But David knows he's been anointed to be king. God keeps promising through the line of day. There are so many promises that mean that David has to survive. And so he's going to survive. And so he says in this moment, don't worry about Saul. God will take care of it. And then he says, okay, take his spear and what else? This is important later. Take the spear and the jug of water beside his head and let's get out of here. Now, you can imagine humanly they're like, shh, don't make a sound. It's not the time to sneeze, cough, fall over something. Everybody is asleep. But look what happens. Look at what we learn. David took the spear and jug of water that were near Saul's head. This is kind of risky business. Remember, he's walked in and all of Saul's warriors are right there. They're all asleep, but they're right there. He and Abishai all got away without anyone seeing them or even waking up. Now, and then it tells you exactly why. He didn't do it out of luck. He didn't do it. I told you before, the chances of every one of them being asleep, 3,000 of them being asleep at the same time and no one waking up. If someone said to you, there's $1 million in the camp and 3,000 people are asleep, all you have to do is go through the camp, get the money, and nobody see you or wake up. And by the way, if you wake them up, you're dead. Absolutely. Basically, there's no way this can happen, but the Bible tells us what? The Lord has put Saul's men into a what? It's exactly what I've been saying this whole time. That David is protected to the nth degree because God is protecting him. It's easy for me to say it. It's easy for me to stand here and play Monday morning quarterback. But David has just said, God will take care of Saul, whether in battle, old age, whatever. That's God's business. He seems to get it at moments. And I want you to see, because the next chapter, you're like, how did we get from here to here? Look at what the Lord has put Saul's men into a deep sleep. Do you mean that God, like, providentially provided for David? Of course he did. Do you think David figured that out? Of course he did. I mean, they could have almost sang, danced around every person. They wouldn't have woke up. They could have fallen over, sneezed. They could have sat there. They could have eaten dinner. And God had put think about the power of that. God has the power to put all your enemies to sleep, and not just to sleep, into a deep sleep. You can't beat God. You can't fight against. Saul cannot get David. I mean, David is literally at his head, and Saul can't get him. He put Saul into a deep sleep. In case you haven't noticed, Saul can't win, David can't lose, and God is working all of this out. Look at verse 13. David could have just left, but he doesn't. He climbs a hill opposite the camp until he was at a what? So he wanted to talk some trash, but he wanted to make sure that maybe he was far enough away. He goes and he says he finds a hill opposite the camp. And when he was at a safe distance, he shouts to the soldiers and to Abner, son of Ner, "Wake up, Abner." Abner is meant to be the chief security guard. Abner's the one that you're putting your faith in. Abner's the one by the king. Abner's a big, strong dude. Abner is what Saul is trusting in when he fell asleep. The problem is Abner was asleep as he was. I don't know how much you pay your security guard, but when you need them and they're asleep, probably not great. And look at what it says. He doesn't just shout to Abner. He shouts to who? He shouts to the army, to the soldiers, because he's going to make a fool out of all of them. He's going to make a point to all of them. It's one of those moments where God has won and David's going to celebrate it to the nth degree. This hasn't anything to do with David. David couldn't make him sleep. David wasn't a hypnotist like, you fall asleep. He can't do it. Look what happens. Wake up. And Abner says, who is it? You imagine they're waking up from this deep sleep and someone's yelling, hey, Abner. He says, who is it? And then David starts. Well, Abner, you're a great man, aren't you? David taunted him. Where in all Israel is anyone as mighty? This is awesome. I mean, this is like Why haven't you guarded your master the king when someone came to kill him? Well, why hasn't he guarded him? Because God wouldn't allow him to guard him. God put them all in a sleep. And so David comes like this victorious soldier and he makes fun of them. He's like, oh, you're really strong. Remember Mount Carmel? Elijah did the same thing, right? Where's your guards? Are they asleep? Are they in the restroom? What are they doing? Remember Elijah watched all of the people dance and cut themselves and do all their pagan revelry and do all of that. And Elijah just laughs at them and is like, oh, is your God tired or what? I mean, he does. And then he says, by the way, well, I'm not just going to call on the name of the Lord. Let's make all of this wet first. Let's do everything, and then I'll call on the name of the Lord. Elijah, and then just, this is it. And Elijah has this moment. It's brilliant. And the next time you see him, he's under a tree and he's miserable. That's us. And he's scared of Jezebel. Look at what it says. Verse 16. This isn't good at all. I swear by the Lord that you and your men deserve to die because you failed to protect your master. Now remember, David's job has been to protect Saul when he was at his house, well, to help him to be a part of that. David understands the importance of protecting your master. You and your men deserve to die because you failed to protect your master, the Lord's anointed. Look around. And now he says it. And Abner's heart must have been, you know how you get that moment where your heart kind of turns over your stomach? Where are the king's spear and the jug of water that were beside his head? And what does Abner know in that moment? What did you say? How weak does he appear, and how strong does not only David appear, but God? You ever had a moment where you realize you're just solidly beaten? Abner has no excuse, no reason. And by the way, he starts to figure out, hold on, no, we're all asleep. And he says to him, where's your spear and where's the jug of water? Man, maybe Abner should be figuring out you shouldn't fight God and his people. That just as Saul is God's anointed, so is David. That coming against David is like coming against God, and it's not working. It cannot work. And yet we fight battles we know we can't win and keep doing it, right? And then in verse 17, you know who starts to speak up? Saul. Saul recognizes David and calls out, is that you, my son David? And David says, yes, my lord the king. That's pretty hard words, I would think, to get out. But there's a humility. See, David's really weird. Like, there's humility, there's power, but he says, yeah, it's me. He's not scared of that. He's found distance. He says, yes, my lord the king. And then he asks again what he asked before. Why are you chasing me? What have I done? What is my crime? Really, the answer to that, God has anointed me and given me what was yours. Because Saul wouldn't attack the Amalekites, because Saul lied, because God took his kingdom from him and he gave it to David. So who are you going to hate? Of course you're going to hate the one who takes over from you. The one who now possesses everything that you lost. Every time Saul looks at David, he remembers what he lost. And so Saul recognizes David's voice and he calls out, is that, and this is kind of putrid, is that you, my son David? Oh, my son, like the one you're trying to kill, that son? And David replied, yes. Why are you chasing me? What have I done? What is my crime? And then he says, but now let my lord the king listen to his servant. Listen to what David's figured out. Listen to what he says. If the Lord has stirred you up against me, then let him accept my offering. In other words, if God is mad at me, if I've done wrong and God is using you to come after me, then I will sacrifice and I will make amends and will make it right. David says one of us is off. One of us is wrong. Either God is sending you against me, or you're doing your own thing. They can't be both true at the same time. Did God send you or not? That's what he's asking Saul. Is this a mission from God? And if it is me, if this is a mission, and David knows it isn't, but if this is a mission for God to come after me, I'll do what I need to do. I'll sacrifice, I'll do whatever you need me to do. But if this is simply a human scheme, that's exactly what it is. We just read on Sunday, those who trust in human schemes are cursed. If this is simply a human scheme, think about how rough a statement that is. How many of us want to really be invested in a human scheme? What's a human scheme? Well, it's the opposite of a godly scheme. It's doing what you want to do, how you want to do it, without consulting who? We would look at that and think, Saul, you are nuts. You are part of the human scheme. You have a human scheme with a human mind, with human wisdom, with human strength, human everything. Saul, what are you doing? And yet, let's just stop and pause for a moment and ask ourselves, have we ever been part of a human scheme? Have we ever done something that God never called us to do? Have we ever trusted in our own ability, our own strength? See, that it's weird because you read the Bible and you're like, Saul, you're nuts. So how could you be involved in a human scheme? And then yet you look at our lives and it doesn't take much to realize all of us have been involved in human schemes. Like, God, I didn't like the way that went down, so I'm going to scheme it. God, I don't like how this is feeling. We come up with these human schemes. You see it all over Scripture. You see it all over the place. And Saul has come up with this scheme. I mean, think about how foolish this is. God has destined David to be king, so I'm going to step in and kill him. What? God has pronounced and announced that David will be king, so Saul's like, no, I'm going to change that. Think about how stupid that is. God has ordained that this would happen, and Saul's like, no, it's not going to happen. Well, we should know by now what God ordains is what? Going to happen. And so he says, if this is a human scheme, then may those involved be cursed by the Lord. What's David subtly or not so subtly saying? Saul, in all this stuff, in all your planning, what you haven't yet figured out is you're cursed by the Lord. And by the way, right quick, we're going to see 1,000% he is. You imagine, we talked about it on Sunday, the potential we have, the inheritance we have this side. And Saul had all of it, and he just dropped it. He let it all through his hands. And now, David says, this is either God coming at me, in which case I'll make amends and do whatever I need to do. But if it's a human scheme, then may those involved be cursed by the Lord. Now think about how dangerous a human scheme is. Who started this human scheme? The devil can't, right? But humanly, who started the human scheme? How many people has he taken down with him? Every person that got involved in, and by the way, we've had all these people from all these towns trying to find favor with Saul. You've got all of these people saying, Saul, hey, David's here. Will you help me out? There's so many people trying to do the will of Saul. What they don't understand is when they're doing the will of Saul, they're now being cursed by who? Now think about that. You're asking people to join you, and every person that joins you is cursed. Everyone that gets involved in the scheme of Saul to come after David is going to be dealt with by God. Can you imagine putting out that flyer? Wanted, help, downside, cursed by God. I mean, that's like those medicines, right? We'll fix this, but this is all your problems. It's like, man, I'd rather have the problem than all that. Right? This will clean athlete's foot, but you might die. Well, I'll take them. Those involved be cursed by the Lord. But if this is simply a human scheme, then may those involved be cursed by the Lord. That's exactly what's going to happen. For they have driven me from my home. I can no longer live among the Lord's people. And they have said, go worship pagan gods. Look at what David says. In the midst of all of this, in the midst of all this scheming, and when he prays, may they be cursed, you're going to see exactly what happens to Saul. They have driven me from my home. I can no longer live among them. Listen to David's heart. Listen to what David is missing because he's been on the run. He misses home. You ever missed home? He's been driven from home, from serving even with Saul, from all of this stuff. He says, I can no longer live among the Lord's people. Look at what David is hurt. And this is another good example of David, the good person, the holy person. He misses the fellowship of what? Of God's people. He misses God's house. He misses all of this stuff. He misses the tabernacle. He misses God's people. And look at what the message has been. When you're not around godly people, when you're not around the people of God, look, what is the message? Go and worship pagan gods. That's what David keeps hearing. Because lost people look at David and say, God's clearly not working for you, why don't you switch? Because to the naked eye, it looks like David isn't really being helped by God, but they don't realize that God's just sent 3,000 people to sleep. Like lost people don't understand God. Job's wife said, curse God and what? She had a struggle. She had a problem. Lost people look at us and they don't understand God. They don't understand his schemes, his character, his nature. Ergo, when we are sick, they tell us to ditch God. When we don't have what we think we need, they tell us why you... See, do you think lost people understand why you're here tonight? The reason you're here, they don't understand that. And you know what they expect in their messed up mind? That if you're here, that everything must be good. And the only way God can be good and holy is if everyone's fine, healthy, and nothing's a problem. Well, there's not too many seats in before we like, that's not true. I mean, imagine if you just came to church when everything was fine. No problems. But that is the call of the world. This is what the devil's trying to do to David. Get so dejected with God that you'll chase pagan gods. That you put your hope in anybody else. And David is so strong, there's some things he won't be shaken on. And David, he never falls for an idol. David says, they're telling me go worship pagan gods, but guess what? He doesn't. But listen, so this is what I'm trying to get at. We are so strong. David doesn't fall for, to my knowledge, if I'm remembering, I don't think there's ever a passage where he falls for idols. He falls for a woman, but he doesn't fall for idols. He falls for lies, but he doesn't fall. He has just said, I no longer live among the Lord's people. And whether it be whoever it is, they're speaking in his ear. What did he just say about Saul? What did I just start with? God's going to take care of who? God's just put him asleep. And David says, whether it's old age or in a battle, God's going to take care of who? Saul. And then in the very next breath, listen to what he says. Must I die on foreign soil far from the presence of the Lord? He's making a point to Saul, but deep down, David's and we'll see it, David's kind of concerned about that. What are the chances of David dying on foreign soil in this? He can't. The whole point is, David, you can't die. You can't. Not now. Of course he dies, but not here, not now. It can't happen. And he says, I'm far. Listen to his heart. I don't want to die here on foreign soil, which is partly far from the presence of the Lord. He misses the presence of the Lord. He misses worship. He misses all the stuff. He misses the things of God, which is awesome. And he doesn't want to die in foreign land. But hold on to that thought. He says, I don't want to die in a foreign soil. Why is the king of Israel come out to search for a single flea? He says, Saul, I'm like a single flea. I'm nothing. I'm not important. Why would you spend all this time and all this money and all you get is a flea? Why does he hunt me down like a partridge on the mountains? Verse 21. Saul, it says what? Okay, how many people believe him? How do you know when someone confesses if it's real or not? Yeah, it's afterwards, right? There's a response. It's hard. When someone says, I'm sorry, they could, listen, people can have the shaky voice, the tears, but you don't really know if they're sorry until what? Till after the fact. Saul has already proved that his sorries don't really, and David sure don't believe him, and I'll show you why. Saul confesses. Well, listen, take that for what it's worth. I have sinned. Well, that's true. That is really, really true. And then he says, come back, my son, and I will no longer try to harm you. For you valued my life today. I've been a fool and very, very wrong. You got to watch out what people tell you. You got to watch out for people like Saul, because soon you could go back home and it's not what you thought it was. And so Saul, on the outside, looks repentant. He says, hey, you're my son, come back home, and I won't ever try to harm you. You valued my life today. I've been a fool and very, very wrong. We'll see that that's absolutely meaningless. Look at verse 22. What does he ask for? He says, here is your what? Well, wasn't there two things? What was the other thing? He doesn't even offer him his water jug back. He don't care about the spear, but he needs a water jug for his men and him. He doesn't ask for the water jug back. He tells him, I'll give you your spear back. He doesn't give him his water. That's kind of like if I took a sword and some food from you, you can have your sword back. You'll get that later. He wants to give the sword back because it was just the sword was there just to make a point. He could, by the way, David could take Saul's spear. That would be the ultimate, well, you don't want it. But Saul's just confessed and got ooey gooey, right, and called him his son. Who would you give the spear to? Saul. But look at what he says. Send out one of your who? Young men. Well, why is he not asking Saul just to come and get it? Or why is he not saying, hey, Saul, I'll give you it? No, of course, he doesn't trust him a lick. So he's like, send one of your young boys, and if he tries anything funny, I'll just kill him. The Lord gives his, and listen to what he says in verse 23. The Lord gives his own reward for doing good and for being loyal. How true is that? Man, if we would believe that, we would serve the Lord even better. The Lord. When you're looking for blessing and reward, when you want somebody to take care of you, when you want someone to tell you it's worth it, be steadfast, immovable, knowing that everything you do for the Lord, nothing is in vain. The Lord gives his own reward. How good is the Lord's reward? Is it the best? Why do we not like God's rewards? Or why do we not like the thought of just saying, you imagine serving a master and him saying, well, I'll give you my own reward. Well, what is it? Well, I'm not telling you. How many of you trust your boss enough to say, hey, I need you to really work like 25 or more hours this week. What am I going to? Oh, don't worry, I'll give you a special reward. You probably have a question. Anyone that says, oh, don't worry, I'll give you something special. Yeah, thank you, but what is it exactly? But God's the one. Look, David understands the Lord gives his own reward for doing good. In other words, I don't need your sword. Because then you think, I don't need your sword because God's going to give me whatever I need. Like, if the reward for this is your sword, I want God to reward me for what I've just done. I've just stood for God. I've just not killed the king. And God's going to reward me for it. He says, basically he's saying, God, by your help, I've done something good and I've been loyal. and the Lord will give his own reward. Saul, I don't need your reward. Well, that's very humiliating to the king, right? The king who everyone is bowing to, the king who everyone is going to try and... The only reason they want David dead is because they think that grants them favor with Saul. Remember, he's offered his daughters, he's offered all of this stuff. The only reason people really hate David is because they want to get in with Saul. And they've been hoodwinked by this. And by the way, you have to be careful in our lives what rewards we're chasing and who we're chasing. People will put God on the back burner whilst they seek the reward of a business, money, their own agenda. I mean, we look at this and say, of course the Lord rewards. Of course he gives his own reward. But then we look at our lives and we're like, man, we wanted a different reward. We wanted to take the reward into our own hands. And he says, the Lord will give me a reward. He doesn't know what. He doesn't know when. And he says, I refuse to kill you even when the Lord placed you in my power, for you are the Lord's anointed one. David said, God put me right there. It's a test. God put me right there, and I didn't kill you. I took the water, I took the spear, because then, you weren't in my camp. No, I was. You see, the spear and the water prove that David was in the camp. They were fast asleep. They have no evidence that David's in the camp, apart from, if I wasn't in the camp, how do I get this? Look at what he says. Look, I refuse to kill you, even when the Lord placed you in my power, for you are the Lord's what? And may the Lord value my life, verse 24, even as I have valued yours today. May he... Now, look at what David prays. Look at what he says. This is us. This is what I'm getting at. May he rescue me from all my what? David wants rescue. David believes that God can rescue him from how many? Not just some troubles. Okay? So David says, God is good. God will reward me. And he says, may God rescue me from all my troubles. That's a lot. That's spiritual, emotional, financial. That's inner man, outer man. I mean, he's saying, God, you reward how you want. But God, I pray that you'll rescue me from all my troubles. And Saul said to David, blessings on you, my son David. This is all putrid. You will do many heroic deeds. That's true. And you will surely succeed. That's also true. How do you know that this was not what it looks like? David went away and Saul goes home. So you've made up, everything's great. It's kind of like marriage counseling. Did it work? Yeah, where are you going? We live separately. I mean, if you're in marriage counseling because you've separated and it's all ooey goo, I love you too, I forgive, yeah. And then that day you leave the marriage counselor and you go to your separate houses, something's still awry, something's still wrong. But I thought you said you loved me. Well, I did. You know already that Saul and David are not cool. If this was the case, David could... What has David said? I want to be around God's people. I want to be back there. Saul's his ticket back there. And yet he knows. He's got the wisdom of God. He knows. David goes away and Saul goes what? And how many people you think that Saul never attacks David? Never tries to come after David. Here's the thing. This is a moment they never see each other again. David and Saul will never run into each other again. This is it. David has been waiting for God to do something. And this is the last encounter he'll physically have with Saul. Look at 27 and you'll get where I'm getting at. And this is our struggle. This is what I'm trying to tell you. In chapter 26, David has prayed to God to rescue him from all his troubles. David has said that God rewards me in a special way because I've done good. And I didn't kill you. David has said in that amazing statement, surely the Lord will strike down Saul. Surely he'll die of old age. David has seen God put him asleep. He's had the sword. He's got the water. There's been victories. There's been power. There's been all this stuff. And God keeps telling David, I've got you. I've got you. I've got you. I've got you. And in chapter 27, what invades David's head? After all, how many, just let's be honest, how many people at this point think Saul's got a chance of killing David? The evidence of the first 26 chapters is you don't have a chance. Last time you fell asleep. But read what it says in verse 1, somebody, of 27. This says he kept thinking to himself. How crazy is that thought? God has just rescued him again. God has just shown him again. God has moved against Saul again. God has empowered David again. And there's this like weird fight going on. God rescue me from all my troubles. God will take care of Saul in old age or battle. God, you're mighty, you're strong. God, you're this and that. And yet deep down in his mind and his heart, he couldn't run away from what? He couldn't sit still and just have enough faith in God to say, Saul cannot get me. And he kept thinking over and over and over. Ooh, it's like God said in 100 times. But David's like, man, God, I know you've done it 100 times. But will you do it again? And I think we face that very same. How many times has God repeatedly shown you something? How many times has God shown you that he'll provide money when you need it? And yet next time you need some money, how many of us are like, no problem, he's done it 98 times. We're good. Sit down. Just be quiet. Chill out. He's done it 98 times, but somehow on the 99th, maybe he's too old. Maybe he's forgotten. Maybe he can't do it anymore. I've told you before, my mom told me about this, like the amount of faith my parents had to have from when he was traveling and preaching, and all the stories and all the money and all the stuff. I don't know if I've even told this. I may have told this story. There was a time when, but God was always telling my parents, just trust me. Just do the right thing and trust me, and I'll pay you out. Not the way you think, not how. I may have told you this. There was a time when my dad went to a church to do a revival, whatever. He never charged anything. They took up a love offering. The love offering, that's how, church doesn't have to take out the budget. They just do a love offering, whatever. Whatever you get, you get. Old boys are sitting in the back counting the money. My dad just happens to be there. And they say, there's no way we can give him this much money. My dad happened to be there and heard it. You imagine taking up a love offering and saying, hold on, we need some of this. And they literally said, we can't give them that much. They weren't going to take all of it, but they weren't going to give it all. Wow. So what do you do in that moment? How upset would you be? Some of us would run in and be like, oh, you'll give me every penny of that. Some of us would run home and never be at church again. What do you do in that moment? And this is what I miss, and this is what I loved about him. He walked in there straight, looked at them, said, I heard what you said. I'm not taking a penny. Do what you want. I'm not taking a penny. And watch what God does. And you know what? We never missed out because he did that. Can you see all of the way home? Man, I just gave, there's so many reasons not to do that, right? And imagine if you go home and you tell my mom that and she's like, what are you doing? At least take something. You see how, but you see how you need to be together? I mean, what happens if my dad goes home and she says, well, you should have just taken what you could? There's so many times. You think that's coincidence that he happened to hear that? My brother-in-law Steve was talking about it the other day, and that's why I remember it. And so God comes on the back of that. And I don't even think my dad even knew the amount. He just knew they were going to take some. Yeah, well, yeah. So the next time someone does you wrong, God took care of you the last time. But my mom will tell you, every month they seem to struggle with this, like, where the money's coming from. And how, and God did it, and they did it, and he did it, and he did it, and he did it for month after month after month after month. And yet my mom told me, Phil, you would think after years and years of God providing religiously every month that I would sit there next month and not have a worry in the world. And she said, but I'm telling you, I still struggled every month. And that's our problem, right? Like, God, you've done it for 5 years in crazy ways. And David has seen the hand of God. David knows the anointing, knows the calling, knows the power of God. He's beaten Goliath, he's been anointed, and yet in his mind, in his heart, the enemy keeps telling him what? Someday Saul is going to get me. You ever been there? God, you just healed me, but one time my sickness is going to take me out. God, yeah, I know you gave me this time, but next time maybe you won't. It's crazy. Look, how can David possibly think that Saul is going to get him? I get it. I get it, but the evidence is pretty strong that he's not, right? Wouldn't you slap him and just say, 3,000 people just fell asleep so you wouldn't die? Like, what more do you want? Like, don't you think the Lord's ever, like... They're going, really? I mean, like, we just showed Pat Taylor. He's kind of, like, what's his problem? Didn't we just... Yeah, we just showed him. Like, how many more times do you need to see God working for you before you just say, you know what, I don't have to worry about that anymore? And he still thinks so. And by the way, irony of all ironies, what has he just got mad at Saul for? He just got mad at Saul for making up human schemes. And in fact, he's asked the Lord to curse anyone that makes human schemes. Ta-da! Look what happens. The best thing I can do. David says, David is petrified that Saul is somehow going to get him. And so David comes up with this idea. David has now just headlong ran into a human scheme. You know what his genius idea is? I'm going to go and live with the Philistines. Because if I live with the Philistines, old boy won't come after me. Well, that's true. Saul doesn't have the guts or the bravado to go into Philistine country and try and take out David. So David decides, you know, without God's calling, without God's direction, he said, and by the way, this whole move is based on what? It's based on fear. You ever done something totally based on fear? You ever made a decision that you can sugarcoat it, you can spiritualize it, you can say what you want, but the whole reason you made the decision was simply you were scared. You said no to God. Why? Because I was scared. You didn't want to give that. Why? Because I was scared. The decisions we make that if the truth be known, it's not God's plan, it's not God's way, we just bailed out because we're scared. And the enemy, this is us, this is what I'm getting at. We gotta somehow see this. David is like saying, don't worry, God's got Saul. And then he's like, no, Saul. You see how kind of bipolar he is? And as I study this, I'm like, man, Lord, this is us, this is me. I see it more clear than I ever have. And then look what he says. Saul will stop hunting for me in Israelite territory, and I'll finally be safe. What do you mean you finally be safe? Remember what his wife Abigail told him? You're as safe as a treasure in the pouch. Isn't that what she said? You're like the treasure in that pouch. God has put your hand on you. You're protected. David's like, I need to be safe. And he takes 600 men and their families with him. And this gets even better. I don't even know how this works out. Where does he go to? He takes 600 men and he joins who? Achish, the king of Gath. Why is that immensely funny? Well, does anyone remember what happened last time they met? What happened the last time they met? The last time, go back to 1 Samuel 21. This is awesome. This is the best plan, by the way, right? In 1 Samuel 21, verse 10, David escapes from Saul, and he goes to King who? King Achish of Gath. But the officers of Achish were unhappy about his being there. Isn't this David, the king of the land, they asked? Isn't he the one the people honor with dances, singing? Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s? David heard these comments and was very afraid of what king of... He was so afraid of the king. Look, he was so afraid of the king, he pretended to be insane. He scratched on the doors and drilled down his beard. So last time you met him, you were deathly afraid. You thought the best idea was to scratch on doors and act like a lunatic. King Achish says, I don't need any more madmen. And now David looks back. I mean, do you not remember that the last time you acted, is he going to go to King Achish with drooling again? Like, oh, I'm healed. This is David's idea. The man I was scared of last time, the man I acted insane in front of, he's my best ticket out of here. It's nuts. And yet we will find in our lives, every decision we make that is man-made, every decision we make that's outside of God's will, every decision we make because of our pride or our fear or our insecurities is so bizarre and so crazy and so destined to fail, and yet we keep signing up for them. How many schemes have you signed up for on your own or someone else's scheme? And so he goes back to his old buddy, King Achish. If you're the king, wouldn't you be a little bit weirded out? Oh, you're not mad anymore? Oh, and and David takes his 2 wives along with him. The third one's already been given away. That's great. The wife from Jezreel and Abigail, Nabal's widow from Carmel. Word soon, of course it did. Word soon reached Saul that David had fled to Gath. And guess what? So everything's going to be good and easy, right? His scheme worked. David's brilliant, a genius, and it's all going to be fantastic. I'll go to the Philistine country. Saul can't get me. Saul's not coming after me. Ergo, David wins. Whatever. Nah. Hold on. One day, David said to Achish, if it's all right with you, we would rather live in one of the country towns instead of here in the royal city. Gath is the royal city. David wants to be a bit more secluded. David wants to live somewhere else. Verse 6. Achish gave him the town of Ziklag, which still belongs to the kings of Judah to this day. What's crazy about that? That was part of the inheritance. That was part of the land from Judah that they were always meant to have, this Ziklag. And God has graciously given Judah this back through David, and it says they still have it to this day. And they lived there among the Philistines for how long? For 1 year and 4 months. For 16 months, David lived in enemy territory. You know what he couldn't really do in 16 months? What has he said he missed? I miss being around God's people. Well, going to the Philistines probably isn't the best idea then. You think he's been able to show his love for the Lord in Israel in 16 months? He's had to kind of go covert, right? And he sits there for 16 months and by the way, here's problem number 1. How do you sell that to the 600 men?
I'm curious the 600 men weren't selling it to him in the previous chapter. He said, people have been telling me, go to other lands, go worship other gods. I'm curious whether or not some of those people weren't his own men saying, hey, we're tired of running from Saul.
Maybe. Maybe. But how do you tell them how great and how good God is and how that he's going to take care of Saul? Why are we going to Philistine country? Because I'm scared of Saul. What? Look, and we'll pray. But look, isn't that the dilemma we put our children in? Is God our provider? Yeah. Huh. Do we give? No. Why not? Oh, money's too tight. Well, didn't you just say God's our... Do you see how we mess up our kids a bit? Like, hold on. Daddy, you said God was our protector. Yeah, so what you scared of? We say things because they sound good and they're biblical, and we tell our kids God will provide and God's this, and then when they start asking questions, it's like, how does David, sell spiritually, this is God's move to go to the Philistines? He's going to get himself in a horrendous mess, because that's exactly what happens when you do your own thing. And we'll see next time that David gets himself all messed up. And guess what? Guess what he has to do he doesn't have to. Guess what he turns to in enemy territory? Not telling the truth. It's bonkers. It's bizarre. And yet, I believe this is a struggle of all of our lives. It keeps coming up in Scripture. There's got to be a reason for it in my life, in your life. And it's almost like God saying, I want you to recognize that this is your struggle, that you have all of this good stuff, that you have this, but there's this stuff, there's this underlying belly of stuff that we need to get rid of. Maybe in the church, in our lives, there's this there's this undergird, and it keeps coming up. And David has a problem with lying, and it keeps coming up. And David has a problem with lust, and it keeps coming up. And David has a problem somewhat with trust. If you want to see what I'm talking about, how do you go from beating Goliath to being scared of Saul? Don't we laud David as a giant killer? And yet now he's hiding in Philistine country. I'm telling you, that's what can happen to us. That's why being a Christian is so difficult, because it's not one battle. It's a daily battle. And God says, just trust me and I'll give you daily bread. That doesn't mean cash. It can, but that's not all that means. God's like, I'm going to take care of you every single day. Emotionally, spiritually, physically, anyway, I'll take care of you. And our struggle is, one minute we believe it and the next, it's like we forget. And David finds himself with 600 of his men. He doesn't want to be in the town, in the big city of Gath. He asks for Ziklag. He gets to Ziklag. And it all gets very tricky from there. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts before